welcome South Coast Matters. My name is Paul Letendre. This is Julie Taylor.
And South Coast Matters is a public access channel program where we bring together civic leaders, business leaders, and citizens so that we can work together in harmony to improve the conditions on the South Coast.
Today's guest is Senator Marc Pacheco. Marc is the chairman of the Senate Committee on Global Warming and Climate Change. He's a vice chair on the Joint Committee of Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy. That means if your electric bill's too high, you can call Marc. In 2000, he received the honor of Commander of the Order of Prince Henry the Navigator, the highest award bestowed on a civilian by the Portuguese government. His work with the Portuguese Americans in support of the nation of East Timor, is that how you say East Timor?
East Timor.
Timor.
Yeah.
His fight for independence has been praised by Nobel Prize winner Jose Ramos Horta, who was the former president of East Timor. And he called Senator Pacheco Schindler of East Timor. Now, if you know where East Timor is, it's not far off of Australia. Between New Zealand, Australia, and Indonesia, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty impressive title they gave you, the Schindler of East Timor. That's very impressive.
I know, I've never been...
Because Tony Cabral was very involved with me at that time to try to do what we could to bring some recognition to the tremendous tragedy that was taking place there at the time. And they received their independence. They had a democratic vote, and now they're a new country as a result of a lot of work that countless numbers of people had done on their behalf. So.
Originally settled by the Portuguese, correct?
Originally, yeah, it was under Portuguese control, I think, for some number of years, hundreds of years, and they were given their independence. They were a colony of Portugal, given their independence, and then the Indonesians came in and took over, and that's what created the problem for the East Timorese. And so it's interesting. You should have picked that out of my bio, because that wasn't one of the things I thought you would be reading. But
now that impressed me. Schindler of just anybody compared to Schindler, that impressed me.
Well, we were actually very embarrassed by that comparison. Tony Cabral and I, we were in the audience at the Harvard University at the Kennedy School when then Nobel Prize winner Rams Horta made that reference to the two of us, and we told him after, so why would you do such a thing? We didn't do anything. He said, well, Schindler didn't think he did all that big a deal either. He said, but it was...
he made a difference.
It made a difference to so many families, and so we thanked them for the honor, but we were somewhat embarrassed, by it, I must say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But thank you for having me on the show, and
we're flattered to have you.
Well, I was just watching the promo as the show was coming on the air, and what a wonderful job, highlighting different parts of southeastern Massachusetts and having people focus in on our region of the state, which is extremely important to do. So thank you for the work that you are doing, and also the work that all of your colleagues behind the scenes are doing to bring this program to the citizens of
put that whole
Southeastern
thing
Mass.
together. He's an artist. He's a master. So
that's great.
we're happy to have him.
That's great.
Lucky to have him.
Yeah.
So Senator Pacheco's district is called the First Plymouth and Bristol. So it consists of the towns of Bridgewater, Carver, Marion, Middleborough, and Wareham in Plymouth County. And in Bristol County, we have Berkeley, Dighton, Rainham, and Taunton. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a diverse little area.
A lot of cows.
Counties.
Well, it's a big district geographically. As you know, the city of Taunton by itself is close to 50 square miles. I think it's something like 48 point something square miles just with the city. And then you take communities like Carver, which is the Carver and Middleborough, which are large landed cities, second and third largest landed, not cities, but communities in my district next to the city of Taunton. I think Plymouth being the largest town in landmass in the Commonwealth. So there's a lot of geography in my district. There's no question about that. A lot of acreage and a lot of diversity. I have some of the most affluent residents in all of the state of Massachusetts that live in parts of my district, and I have some of the more challenged, economically challenged, residents of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that makes it very an interesting district to represent, because we're dealing with all kinds of issues, from issues along the seashore, communities like Wareham or Marion, in the coastal region of my district, to the urban center of Taunton, to the college town of Bridgewater. I mean, it's just an exciting district to represent.
Good, good. Where does it stand demographically? Independent, Republican, Democrat?
Well, it's not unlike a lot of the state right now. When you take the unenrolled voter, would be the highest voting total, and the Democratic voter would be next, but not by much, in terms of Democrat to Republican. So it's a diverse district that way as well. It's typically been a swing vote district.
Yep.
In campaigns politically, and I have been very fortunate to have won the support of the overwhelming majority of the citizens of the 1st Plymouth and Bristol district for 27 years now. This is going into my I'll in January be starting my 28th year in the Massachusetts legislature, and that's a number of elections that are under my belt, and very often challenged from the far right of the Republican Party. But I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of moderate Republicans and who come to my support during various campaigns, as well as a significant amount of unenrolled voters, and of course more than a majority of the Democratic voters. So I'm very thankful, because I try to govern every day with making sure we do, first and foremost, the constituent service work that needs to be done on behalf of citizens that call my office. That's the most important thing I believe I do, is being able to reach out to various constituencies, small businesses, corporations.
You do have great people in your offices. Mary.
Yes, and I've been blessed with a great staff over the years. Mary Wasilic is my chief of staff. She's been with me the whole time I've been in the legislature.
She's an amazing woman.
God bless her, to put up with me. And I've got a great staff that has been with me since I've been in the House. I started in the House of Representatives in '89, and then in the Senate in '93, and so that brings you up to the 28 years that I will start in January.
28 years, Mark, Senator Pacheco. Have you ever? Are there any bills you can look back on that you sponsored and you really worked hard on, and you look back on now and say, "Boy, I shouldn't have done that. I screwed that one up."
Oh, there are plenty of things that you look back. Obviously, when you look back
20/20 hindsight
on something, it's always 20/20. You can always judge what you should have done or should have done maybe differently. And one of the things that I've said time and again, that I would have voted differently today, and it may not always be popular in this district, but it's on the original gay rights vote. and because I was one of the votes that was on the other side of that, not the gay marriage vote, but the gay rights vote.
Yeah. We've all evolved.
And so
Yeah.
when I look back on that, and I took my position on that based on you know, the huge amount of calls that I received from employers, because they were very concerned at the time that they would be getting a lot of suits that would be coming in, you know, around discrimination suits that would be coming in, that they weren't treating their employees fairly, etc. And I thought, because I had just been lobbied actually by a member of the gay rights community, and in that lobbying I had no idea. The person told me during that meeting that they were gay, and this was something that they cared very deeply about. And as they left, as the individual left rather, I said, boy, if I was an employer, I wouldn't have any idea that the person, and so it sort of made me feel that, well, maybe the employers had a strong argument here, and so I think I was going to support their viewpoint on that. And then looking back on it now, there were no or very little complaints at all, and people thought the sky was going to be falling in, or something major was going to take place. And so if there, you know, to answer your question honestly, if there was one vote that I could take back, it would be that one.
That's
it would be that one.
Good example.
So then on the other
And
hand.
years later, when we did the, you know, gay marriage vote, of course, I was supportive of the effort to have us be a leader in
Who would
the
have thought
nation.
20 years ago
I
that
know.
we'd all be in full support of gay marriage?
Yeah, it's amazing what's happened nationally and around the world.
Yeah.
So then what would be your proudest vote?
Oh, I've got a lot of things. I like to say the thing I'm the proudest of is being able to help the individual citizen when they call the office. Because usually when a person gets to the point when they're picking up the phone to call my office, you know, they are beyond it.
Yeah.
They have no idea what else they should be doing. And there are cases when, you know, for example, I can remember a case like it was yesterday when I had a family friend call my office, and they had an issue with a very close family member that was on the verge of suicide. And they really didn't trust anybody else to come over to the house, and there I was sitting in the house, not knowing what I was doing, but just wanted to express the need to let the individual know that people cared about them, their family loved them, and what can we do to be helpful. And you know, it's years later now, and things worked out very well. But those types of things that you never see in headlines, and you certainly don't do press releases about them, but they impact countless numbers of families every week because of the work that not just myself but my staff does every week on housing, on mental health issues, on health care, on getting through the bureaucracy on behalf of citizens who engage my office to try to deliver for them. I would say from a policy perspective now, when you look at the policy issues that I've been fortunate enough, because of the opportunities that the citizens of the district have given me to sit representing them in the legislature, I've worked on a whole range of policy, whether it's been health care, public safety, legislation, economic development legislation. Over and above helping people individually, I think the best thing I can be doing is try to strengthen the economy to the extent possible, and that's about creating the type of private sector job growth in southeastern Massachusetts that helps to bring about better opportunities for citizens in the entire region. So I think if you look at the Miles Standish Industrial Park,
You were against that, weren't you?
oh, yeah. No. So, you know, the Miles Standish Park and all the work that I've tried to do, working with the Taunton Development Corporation, working with now Mass Development from the state to try to expand the park. Very soon, we'll be developing the last couple of 100 acres there at the park.
What's going in there?
Well, it's all kinds of diverse industries. For example, Montanetti Corporation is consolidating all of their operations and putting their corporate offices at the Miles Standish Park. That company alone will be employing, I mean, they presently have the employees, but a lot of them will be moving this way. And of course, as people move on and retire, there'll be new jobs that will continue to be opening up there. So there's over 800 jobs there alone, just in one company. When you look at all of the diverse types of companies that are there, whether they be small manufacturing to you know, distribution, you know, bio, to you know, the hotel. I mean, there's all kinds of diversity within the Miles Standish Park. And by the end of, when we finish this section of the park, the potential is there to have over 10,000 private sector jobs at the
That's
Miles
incredible.
Standish Park.
You
So if
all
I could
leave
look
at
back,
4:30, so when you're leaving,
yeah. So I mean, when I look back at my political work over the years, I think that's one of the things that has had an impact on my entire district, even though it's in one community in my district. When you go to any of those
your
companies and
entire
you start to
district
talk,
and beyond, Mark.
oh,
really.
that beyond the district. It's
Well,
all
beyond.
of the southeast region and beyond that in terms of the economic spin-off.
That was part of
that
the
is
original
created.
Massachusetts miracle, wasn't it? During the Dukakis
Dukakis talked
turnaround.
about it, yeah. Dukakis talked about it very early on in his presidential campaign, and that was back when, you know, I had the great honor of serving with then Mayor Dick Johnson, who was mayor of Taunton, and I was his chief of staff and budget director for the city of Taunton, and we did a lot of work on community economic development, but also economic development with the park and working with a lot of the other area
Way back in the
mayors.
1900s, huh?
Oh yeah, way back in the
that
Wayback
long ago.
Machine.
Yeah.
Yes. So that was one of the big things, and I think more recently, when I look at policy, there is a bill that was passed that I know we're going to talk about in another show, called the Global Warming Solutions Act, but it is actually dealing with our environment and the impact on greenhouse gas emissions in terms of our air quality. And I know that because we've passed this statute, as long as it stays on the books and it doesn't get repealed, we will make a tremendous difference in terms of public health and moving us to a green energy future, a clean energy future, which will actually cost us all a lot less, and we'll all be a lot more healthier as a result of that piece of legislation. I worked very hard to try to get that done. There's a number of other pieces of legislation that I've worked on relative to public education, K through 12, the 1993 Education Reform Act. I was a big supporter of that, and I was proud to see the other day that we came in #1 in the U.S. again, topping the
Taxpayer
charts.
Protection Act.
Also, the Taxpayer Protection Act.
That's
which
been under attack lately,
it
hasn't
has been under attack a lot, and I hope we get to talk about that a little bit.
Well, we should
Yeah.
talk about that.
Let's talk about that.
Since we segued into that.
Yeah.
It's affectionately known as the Pacheco Law,
Mm-hmm.
but I think if we refer to it more as the Taxpayer Protection Act, that's really, in essence, what it does.
Mm-hmm.
And so why would they pick this particular issue of the MBTA to decide that maybe the Pacheco Law needed to be tweaked?
Well, I mean, obviously, we have a new administration. There's a new sheriff in town, so to speak. The governor was elected by some, I think, The vote total was a little bit more than 40,000 votes, so 20,000, 21,000 votes going one way or the other made the difference on that election. But we do have a new administration that's in office, and Charlie Baker is our new governor. And Charlie Baker was back in the Weld administration when the law first was put into place.
In 1993.
In 1993. Right. And it was signed into, well, it wasn't signed into law because the governor vetoed the law when the legislature passed it. And then we had to secure the votes, a 2/3 majority in the House and the Senate, to override the governor's veto at the time to become law. And Governor Baker remembers that very clearly, and I'm sure for many, many years has been waiting for a time period when he might be able to amend it or repeal it in terms of the statutory requirements of the law, which are not so onerous. And if I could go over them just a little bit.
Yeah.
The law seeks to, when we put it into place, the reason why we put it into place is because we had all kinds of insider dealing going on. There were contracts being handed out to people with less than 2 bidders per contract award. There were no standards set in terms of contract outcomes, what the taxpayer should expect from a contractor. There were no minimum standards relative to wage or health care or any of those types of things. So what we began seeing is contracts that were handed out where the taxpayer was actually paying more than if we would have had the agency do it itself. And there was a whole Globe Spotlight series that uncovered fraud, waste, abuse, a significant, strong hint of corruption that was taking place all across the government. And so we ended up responding.
Was this pre-Big Dig?
Well, it was basically the same type of scenario that was taking place if you look at the Big Dig. And for those that say, well, privatization is better than doing something in the public. Well, I point to the Big Dig all the time in terms of how we privatized a lot of that, and we ended up, not getting what we paid for, but it cost us a lot more at the end of the day because we were having private management actually watching over some of their own work. And so when you do that, it's the fox watching the chicken coop, and there's going to be a lot less chickens at the end of the day with that fox watching the chicken coop. So we put in place a standard whereby we said we're going to have an open public bidding process, and we're actually going to put on the table what we want out of the bid. What are the outcomes? And we want to make sure that at least the same level of service will be provided. If we're going to take our public dollars that come from our pockets as taxpayers and hand those dollars over to a private entity to do public work, then we want to make sure that the work actually gets done, number one, that the quality of the work would be the same, if not better, and that if you're going to do it that way, does the taxpayer actually save something on the contractor by doing it that way? And we said in the law that if you're able to save 1 penny, keep the cost of services the same, or do better, and the qualitative aspects of the service are the same or better. And then we had some wage standard issues where you had to meet at least the minimum wage standard issue. Healthcare would be comparable healthcare provided, etc. Then you can get the contract. Simply put, that's all we ask for, is that taxpayer would be protected at the end of the day. So that's why we called it the Taxpayer Protection Act. The administration at the time preferred not to call it the Taxpayer Protection Act, and that's where my name got attached to it, because they preferred to call it the Pacheco Law.
Kind of like the
because
Obama law, right?
yes, they preferred to call it Obamacare, right, at the federal level. Well, they did the same thing with me back in '93 because, of course, I was coming up for re-election in the next cycle. So they wanted to call it the Pacheco law, and somehow the Pacheco law was costing us taxpayers all kinds of money, and they wanted to tie that around me, put a big anchor on it, and throw both the law and me overboard. Thankfully, that didn't happen. The law has been on the books for a number of years. It's saved
22.
taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars over the years, and we have had privatization that has taken place. Numerous privatization contracts have gone out to bid, have been awarded, and have been privatized, but the taxpayer was promised upon those privatizations that they would actually save some money. And there was a process, a public process, where taxpayers could look on the websites, be able to go back and take a look and see what happened.
Now, this is overseen by the auditor, and some
Right.
numbers that I was looking at said that 80% of the privatization proposals have been approved, so it seems to be very successful. Now, once a contract is privatized, does it get reassessed, or just at the end of the contract it goes back up for?
Well, unfortunately, it does not, and that was one of the compromises we made to get the law on the books in the first place. Once it's privatized, then there's no requirement to have it be rebid again. I have always thought that there should be, because a lot of times these private companies will come in and they'll lowball a bid because they know there's other work that's coming down the road. So they put in place a lower bid and to get the contract, and then once they get the contract, slowly the cost goes up and up and up. And then before you know it, the taxpayer's spending far more money than they would have paid if they did it themselves.
So
Big dig. Right?
yeah, we only have a
yes.
few.
Yeah, we have like 30 seconds.
But I wanted to get back to the MBTA. Now that they've relaxed the Pacheco law, Taxpayer Protection Act, for 3 years, how is that going to help or hurt the taxpayer?
Well, if they don't do anything with it, then it won't hurt the taxpayer. But if they go forward with what I think they're going to try to do, is put out to bid a lot of the routes that would take place. And if they did that, and it could have serious consequences on the taxpayer, because when we look at it, what happened before, on average there were only 1.9 bids per contract award. So first of all, you don't even have what every homeowner would do for their own home,
Right.
is to try to get 3 legitimate bids before they put something out to bid when it's hundreds of dollars. These are hundreds of millions of dollars that we're talking about, and the opportunity for collusion is huge. And that's been my fear from the beginning, that there's good privatization and there's bad privatization, there's good public services and there's bad public services, but it all has to do with the management.
Right.
If you have
We've gotta
good
wrap it up.
management, then it's you have good results most of the time.
This is a topic we could talk about for a long time.
Yes.
We'll get you back. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
with us today, Senator Pacheco. I'm Paul Letendre. This is South Coast Matters.
And I'm Julie Taylor, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.